right, now mine's recording.
Okay. Welcome all you wiretappers out there. I'm here in the studio. I've got our good friend, co-host, Camulus Cam Robinson on the phone and on the Skype. Hi, Cam. How you doing?
Good, Gary. How about yourself?
As good as be expected. Folks, I'm not sure some of the episodes are going to come up, and I won't say anything about the coronavirus, and some of them I'll say it, but we're both on lockdown for the coronavirus, and Cam can't go into work, and I don't have to go into work, but I'm old enough that I'm staying home. I'm staying away. It's a very scary thing, isn't it, Cam?
This is going to be one of those things you look back in history, and kids are going to say, "Do you remember living during the coronavirus?" And it's an interesting time, but yeah, it is kind of scary when you see people in the grocery store with masks and all.
Oh man, I know. I tell you, that first day I went to the grocery store about a week ago. I was kind of paying attention to it, and all of a sudden our mayor said he's doing an emergency. He's calling it a state of emergency in the city. And I said, shit, let me look at the groceries. And, we don't really keep a lot around here. So I went over to the Walmart neighborhood mart, and man, people were slugging that thing, and they were panicked. You could see panic look in their eyes. Now, they weren't fighting or anything, but they were grabbing stuff. And by the time I got there, all the toilet paper was gone.
Oh, shit.
And I guess I didn't even look for hand sanitizer. I've come to find out since then that all you need is a good soap and water is the best thing anyhow for that.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so we're hunkering down. You got plenty of groceries there, Cam. All the things that you like to eat.
We're good. We're just in Chicago, so we got plenty of pork stocked up. So we're
I got enough to last us probably 3 weeks right now. There's just two of us. We don't eat a lot, and then I'll have to get something after that. But I did get a great big bag of dried beans and dried rice, a bag of each. So,
there you go.
And worst comes to worst, we got beans and rice, man.
Beans and rice.
There you go. On that. So I want to thank a couple of people. First of all, I want to thank Tim Wegman from Des Moines, Illinois. He has been a kind of a regular supporter of the podcast. He's an attorney up there in Des Moines. We've had some goings back and forth with email. He's a guy, I may have mentioned this before, he is the guy that went to the Gotti trial and watched Sammy the Bull testify for 2 days. So he emailed me again and said that he wanted to let me know after I talked about Joe Butch Correo when I interviewed Steve St. John, who was with him in the penitentiary, and when we did the show on William Peace, the guy that was the New York City police officer that was snitching to Gotti, he went to the trial and he saw him there, and he'd got a really good picture of him. He said he was staring right at me. I said, man, you're a bold dude.
It's crazy.
But he said he also saw Sal Brulio, who was at one point in time and sometime in the past. So it's he's an interesting guy. He
Gary, here, tilt your camera and then start it up. Pause it for a second. Tilt your camera.
I mean, like that?
Yeah, because you only got from your nose down.
Really? Well, it looks good in this, huh?
Well, yours might show different. I didn't mean to stop you, but I was trying to get.
That's okay. Huh. Yeah, I don't know. I looked good in this before, and I'm like off to the side, so I don't know. I can't quite figure this thing out for some reason.
Yours might be different than mine then.
Anyhow, moving right along. So if I go back like this, does that?
Yeah, then it's the way I see it. It looks too far down.
Okay, all right, that's better.
Yes.
Like that. That's what it needs to be. Okay. To me, I'm kind of looking up my nose holes, but no, well, I'm not.
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, it looks like it needs the whole thing needs to raise a bit.
Oh.
But I mean, I don't know. You know what you can see on your side better than.
Probably up there like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, like that. Like that's like I've got mine sort of up a bit.
Yeah. Hold on a minute. So my mob library here.
I have to get mine off the desk, so
I want to
can use
get
it
this.
for-
I want to get this right because I'm gonna start using this piece here instead of my my other computer. Now, what do I look like in yours?
Now it looks like from your tilted down a little bit.
How's that?
It's a little. It's little up your nose. It's kind of.
Oh, that's yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's not as bad as it was. I'm sure it doesn't look that bad here anymore.
No. Yeah. As
Okay,
long.
all right.
Yeah. Whatever it looks like on your side. Yeah. That's.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. At least that's your whole head in it now.
Yeah. And another time, my friend Tim was down in El Reno, Oklahoma, he's a lawyer. He's doing a deposition down there, and he asked to see Gene Gotti, who was down there. He was working in the laundry, and he was able to go see Gene Gotti. He didn't say he talked to him, but did see him. I guess he maybe just peered through the bars wherever he was. The guard just said, "Hey, there he is." I don't know.
There's Gene.
Hey, Gene's on display. So anyhow, Tim, I really appreciate your support. He's got some different suggestions, and Tim will get around to them. Right now, we're kind of like we're into this Pizza Connection case big time, and I've got another one that I just did, but I'll keep these in mind. What you suggest? He's got a bunch of good photos. If he's not that far away, I may go up through Des Moines, stop and see him, have lunch with him. He's got a bunch of photos that he took when he went to that trial in New York City. You know, those mob guys, they always go to the boss's trial. I had to testify once, and I looked out in the Sabalas, and the whole family, I mean, everybody was out there in the audience watching. It's a little bit intimidating, actually.
Shit,
Here it is.
Supposed to be.
He was asking about a guy called Cockeye Louis Thomas Fratto. Said he changed his name to Louis Farrell. She's from Chicago, who came to Des Moines, who ended up in Des Moines, where this guy's from. He was at Appalachian at the meeting there, and he'd been a hitman, so that might be a story we would want to do.
Yeah.
Here's another guy, my friend from Dan from Sydney, Australia. I just heard from him again recently. He told me, he said the disruptions there are immense. He's a lawyer too, and they called off all the court cases, but first they had to wait in isolation and call them party by party to go in to the courtroom. Everybody wasn't going in the courtroom, and a lot of things are being done by video, but I think they've totally closed them down since then. He's a guy that said, "I've been enjoying your recent episodes. The recent collaborator, Cam, in my opinion, brings a wealth of information and a great voice to your podcast." You hear that, Cam?
I do.
Okay.
Sydney, we're gonna have to do Terry Clark and George Freeman and some of those guys. We're gonna have to do some Australian shows.
And do some Australian story. Him talking that nice about you and being a big podcast supporter. Okay, moving right along. I know folks want to get to this Pizza Connection case, and one other big shout out to Casey Walsh. Casey was gone for a couple of weeks and just got back. We were supposed to have coffee again. I have a mob artifact for him. So Casey, if you're listening to that, as soon as this thing's over, we're going to get together and get some coffee, and I'm going to get you that Kansas City mob artifact that I came into possession of. But Cam, let's get into the Pizza Connection. We've talked about Tommaso Bruschetta and how important he was. We've talked to the FBI agent Lou Flossie, or I did. I've talked to the FBI agent Lee Flossie from Chicago, who was intimately involved in this and was a guy that really coordinated the interaction between Judge Lewis. He really coordinated the interaction and the task force activities from New York City to the Italian, how do you pronounce that? Carabinieri?
Carabinieri.
Yeah. Lee Flossie really did a lot of work. He was the legal attaché for the FBI in Rome during the Pizza Connection case. And you've listened to that podcast by now. I'm going to play that just before this one, I believe. And he really did a lot to coordinate the FBI and Carabinieri. Man, I butchered that one up. I need my butcher's apron on. Oh well, that's part of my charm, ain't it, Kim?
That's right.
And he got to know Judge Giovanni Falcone, really well, and hosted him over here in the United States, and was really personal friends with him. So that was a pretty good episode. Cam and I, if you remember, went back into history, the very first one, and how this whole Pizza Connection thing, what happened before that, up through the French Connection and all that. So now we're up to 1972, the investigation. The Bonanno War is over. Joe and Bill Bonanno are pretty well gone from New York City. They're out in Arizona. The boss of the Bonanno family now was appointed by the commission, I believe, wasn't he, Cam?
Yeah, Rastelli was.
Rusty Rastelli. But Carmine Galante is out of the penitentiary. He was the old Bonanno consigliere, and if I remember right, when I did the story on him, he just kind of bulled his way in and said, I'm the boss.
And Rusty basically went into prison at that time. So as Galante's coming out, Rusty's going in around the same time, ballpark. So, and Galante, he was pretty much plotting to take over. You got a couple guys who were in prison with him at that time. The guy from one of the first turncoats in his book. I'm looking for the book right now. The fat guy from Boston. I can't remember his book from the 70s.
Vinny Tresa.
Vinny Tresa was in prison with Carmine Galante. And he said that as soon as he gets out of prison, this was in the 70s, he's going to take over. And that's exactly what he did. And Rusty Rastelli was a tough guy, but he wasn't on the level of somebody like Galante.
Everybody's afraid of Galante. I remember that. Mm-hmm. Even the big tough black dudes in the penitentiary. I read one story about how he just bullied his way up the front and even used the N-word on them, and nobody. That man must have been something. Now remember that original 1957 meeting in Sicily. Was that at the Hotel des Palmas?
Yes.
Joe Bonanno, Lucky Luciano, and several members of the Sicilian Mafia were together, and that's kind of when they put this together. Gaetano Badalamenti, who will become more important, was a mob boss in Sicily. He was actually an underboss, I think, at that point in time. He will eventually become a boss, and Tommaso Buscetta was there. During the 1960s, the Bonannos and the Gambinos will work with Sicilians to start bringing heroin into the United States. But at that point in time, they had the French Connection, and it was coming out of a lot of it was coming out of Southeast Asia, because they had those connections back to Vietnam when their military was over there, and they were getting booted out by the 60s. But the law enforcement broke up that French connection, and
that was the Lucchese's were involved a lot with that.
That's right.
They kind of got kicked out of that then.
But anyhow, that whole French connection the whole thing was taken down. Check out Robert Cook book by that same name. Then the movie, of course, we all know the movie by William Friedkin was a director. It was a heck of a movie with Popeye Doyle. Everybody remembers Popeye Doyle. You picking your feet in Poughkeepsie, huh? You remember that line? I tell you what, in modern times, what they were doing in that bar, oh my God. You couldn't get away with that shit today.
That's a hell of a good one.
Moving right along. In 1966, Tommaso Buscetta is found by law enforcement and documented he was in Brooklyn running a pizza joint, and he actually bought a couple of more. So he's getting in the pizza business, and he's on the lam a lot from Sicily because of these mob wars they've got going on. He's a good businessman. They said that he'll give away all of his leftover cooked pizza when he closes each night to different people. So he's really well liked in the neighborhood.
Yeah, that gets everybody on your side, keeps them quiet,
Yeah, he's smart. You start running surveillance in that neighborhood on him, and they'll be running down there saying, hey, those FBI and those coppers are setting up the street. I think they're watching you.
That's right.
Because he's been getting away with the free pizza. Those guys, they know the deal. All drug dealers are like that. They try to make friends with the neighbors around them so they can get that inside. That was the problem with running the surveillance in neighborhoods, in those ethnic neighborhoods, man. It's just almost impossible. During this time, it connects with a couple of Italians. During this time, it connects with a couple other Sicilians, Sacca and Salvatore Catalano, and they're both living in New York, and they're connected to the Bonanno family. And Salvatore Catalano, I think he had a deli or something at this point in time. Mm-hmm. So kind of, that's how you build cases. That's how you put things together, get these disparate pieces of information. They see him there, they find out he's running a pizza place, they find these other Sicilians there running businesses. They run Knickerbocker Avenue, which was really the heart of Bonanno country, or Bonanno, I guess country might
That's
be
right,
the right
yeah.
word.
That was their headquarters.
That was it, man. That's where Carmine Galante got killed. Was that?
That was Pete Licata's. That was Joe and Mary's. Joe and Mary's Italian.
And that was on Knickerbocker Avenue.
It was originally under a guy named Pete Licata.
Yeah. And they're connected to the Bonanno family during this time.
Right.
Now, also, in 1970, Italian cops stop a car and they find Gaetano Badalamenti and Tommaso Buscetta together. So see, that's start law enforcement. What you got to do is you start picking up these different little clues. Say these guys are together and they're both connected to the heroin trade, and they're really pretty important stature in the Sicilian mob. And that's when you realize there's something going on, and this is probably what it has to do with as you try to figure out what is going on, because nobody's going to tell you, especially out of Sicily. At least not.
It's easy for us. It's easy for us to look back and say, well, clearly, this one's with this one, from our vantage point. But I mean, you've been in the middle of it. I mean, I would imagine you catch this guy and you talk to each other and you really got a powwow, and it takes a lot of investigation, a lot of effort, and a lot of intuition to try and put all that together in the moment when you're on the hunt. I would imagine that's kind of what it is, right, Gary?
Oh yeah, you got to look at their body language. They've been together more than once. Are they taking any precautions when they got together? It's just a ton of different things to figure out if this was just a happenstance, or if they were just friends, or if this is business. During the 1970s, the DEA will get information that Tommaso Buscetta had arranged for a 50-kilo heroin shipment valued at $500,000 to go to the Eagle Cheese Shop in Brooklyn. And this was part of the French connection. And he'll be indicted as part of that. He hides out. He's really hard to find. He'll go down to Brazil. He's a true transnational criminal. He may be in Canada. He may be in New York. He may be in Brazil. He may be in another country. He may in South America. He may be in Spain. He may be in Italy. That's this international, transnational criminals. They really get hard to pin down.
That was where these guys were so smart. It's just to disappear anywhere.
And in those days, there was a Bonanno capo on the street, and the one you mentioned, they called him, in my research, they called it an obstinate old-timer named Pete Licata.
Right.
And he absolutely did not allow narcotics in his territory.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a quote from him out of that book, The Last Days of the Sicilians. I got a quote from him out of that book, The Last Days of the Sicilians. The quote is, he say, "I no want drugs in my territory, no babania on Knickerbocker Avenue." Now that was Sicilian for heroin or narcotics. I'm not sure if it was heroin or narcotics, but babania.
Babania, huh?
Yeah. But the other Sicilians that were there and the other people in the Bonanno family that wanted to do drugs kind of on the down low, they take care of Mr. Licata pretty quick. He's gone.
He was an old guy. He was born in 1908. So I mean, he was, and then these are all young guys, So they're not going to put up with some old man who's telling them, no, we're going to make our money with gambling or whatever. When you've got $500,000 shipment of heroin coming in every week.
Really, too much money. And he's murdered on November 4th, 1976, and shortly thereafter, like 3 or 4 days, Salvatore Catalano becomes the new Knickerbocker Avenue capo. And right after that, he starts bringing these fresh faces. That's when they start bringing all the zips in from Sicily.
That's kind of interesting to think of. A Sicilian guy is suddenly made capo of an American family. I mean, he was an imported Sicilian, and he wipes out a pretty popular long-term existing Bonanno capo, and that really shows the way the wind was blowing when he's made a capo. Imported Sicilian is actually made a capo. It really shows how things were changing.
And it kind of looks to me like he builds a crew primarily of other Sicilians.
Yeah.
Because shortly thereafter on Knickerbocker Avenue, there's a couple of new guys show up, and they're from Castellamare del Golfo.
Yeah, which is where Bonanno was from.
Right, and they take over a floating baccarat game at the Cafe Viale. And it was they say it was worth $500,000 every week went through that thing. And these guys were Cesare Bonaventre and Baldassare Baldo Amato. And they become Catalano's inseparable companions. And this trio dominated Knickerbocker Avenue and dominated this one crew of the Bonanno family. And actually, though, for a short period of time, Catalano, after Galante gets killed, after Galante gets killed, after Galante gets killed for a short period of time, Salvatore Catalano will kind of take over a little bit until for the whole Bonanno family. He couldn't hold it because he didn't speak English that well, but until the commission will appoint a new Bonanno family leader.
And Amato and Cesare Bonaventre were the guys who were there at the hit at Joe and Mary's. They were actually there as his bodyguards, as Galante's bodyguards. And when they came in, they didn't do anything, and the 3 gunmen blasted away Galante, and then Bonaventre and Baldassare, they just left. They just walked out.
So this is the nucleus for the pizza connection out of Brooklyn. Is where it all came out of. Now, Amato will end up being indicted along with Sal Catalano. Now, Cesar Bonaventre, he met his fate in a different way. We don't really need to go down this path. We don't know how this happened, and I'm not sure exactly when, but we just let it be known. They found his body. He was divided up between 3 50-gallon drums of glue in a glue factory. His head was in one, and assorted parts were in the others. That's a tough way to go. I guess they didn't want anybody to find his body, and somebody must have ratted that out. I didn't really investigate that. We got enough to talk about without going clear down.
They called him the horse after that.
Oh, I thought that was Matty. Matty the horse.
It's a horse at the glue factory.
Yeah, I know. But this Sicilian traffickers, they had worked for a long time to get, they had the French connection. They lost that. It changed back up. They got it going again. They brought as Leon Flossie told us, they brought the chemist from France many times, and the labs out of Corsica and France, southern France, into Sicily, and started this stream of raw product from Turkey and Afghanistan in the Mideast, got it to Sicily and turned it into heroin, and then started shipping it to the United States.
It's kind of interesting, these Sicilians, because you wonder, why didn't the mafia worry they were going to take over? Because they really couldn't. They didn't have any political power. They didn't have any connections. They couldn't speak the language. They couldn't take over. All they could do was make money with shipping the drugs. So they were sort of a necessary evil, and they were allowed to operate. They were seen as well. We'll let them be part of us because they're kind of our cousins. But there was no chance that the Sicilians could actually take over. As they learned the language, they could eventually rise up through the ranks, as you see nowadays. But at the time, they were really just going to make a lot of money selling drugs, and they would never have the connections that the mafia at the time in the 60s and 70s did have. So they were really just a money making crew.
Yeah, that you're exactly right, Cam. Especially the language problem that just would keep them out. But they were making money for the rest of the family and some of the other guys that were involved in this. And in 1977, we had the crack epidemic hit by the 90s, and cocaine kind of started later 80s. But during the 70s, that's when heroin got immensely popular. The addicts population of addicts just shot up immensely. They say as many as 750,000 before at that point in time. And this one article I read said that was 20 times more heroin addicts that you could count. You can't ever really get an exact count, but 20 times more heroin addicts than there had been before this whole Sicilian pipeline started back as far back as 1963.
Jesus.
One time,
it just increase the supply. They're gonna take it,
Yeah. One time the FBI was on a wire, and they had heard that there was the pipe from Canada was coming in, and then they noticed a stranger in close conversation with Sal Catalano at his cafe. Cafe was Scarpello. They identified this guy, and they knew some heroin was coming in. They didn't really have enough to go on where it might be or anything about it. And this guy, they identified him. He was Giuseppe Ganci, who was kind of a really high-ranking person, and he was on the cupola, which was the Sicilian Commission.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the new overseer from Sicily in New York at that point in time. And that was when they really started sending hundreds of kilos to, through Brooklyn, but they were sending them all over the United States. And in 1977, they say the police really had never even heard of Catalano, and the FBI was just starting to get onto him. The Italian police, they knew he was a mob guy, but they'd kind of, forgotten about him. They didn't know where he was. They didn't know he was over here. And there really wasn't that much coordination between the Sicilian and the Italian police and the American police, or the FBI and the Italians. So it's pretty easy to get yourself lost in that transnational thing back in the 70s and even the 80s. He was the street boss in that area, and everybody in Kansas City knew it, and the FBI knew it. I don't think they didn't really have anybody to Sicily to go check on.
I mean, that's kind of a unique thing, just farming out, and probably something that the police didn't see, that you don't really expect is for the mafia, especially as powerful as they are and as sort of well known as they were around New York, to farm out something like that, especially to a bunch of guys who are butchers or bakers who own pizza shops. They just look like they're just immigrants who bought up pizza shops, or immigrants who are working as butchers, or immigrants who are working as bakers. These guys were just hardworking immigrants who had started little shops, but in truth, they were part of an international drug ring, and they were smuggling hundreds of kilos of heroin, and the shops were really just fronts. I mean, but really, they just look like the regular American story of immigrants who come over from the old country and set up shop. So whereas you've got these mob guys in Cadillacs driving around, and you know who they are, and they're wearing the chains and the San Francisco slacks and these leather jackets, and you know those guys, but the guy running the pizza shop in the apron, I mean, what the hell's he gonna do?
Really, it was pretty slick, and as they started watching Catalano, they started seeing him, like Anello Della Croce. He palled around with him. We were close to him, which was the Gambino's underboss at the time, although he was in the Bonanno family. But the Gambinos were involved in this whole Sicilian deal, bringing drugs in. They had their own little crew of Gambino's third cousins that were living down in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. What, you remember the story on them?
They were cousins, the Cherry Hill Gambinos in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. They were cousins of Carlo Gambino, and they Rosario Gambino and later on Johnny Gambino, and they they partnered with Salvatore Inzerillo in Sicily, and they imported a lot of heroin. And then later, when Gotti took over the Gambinos, Johnny Gambino really was delivering a lot of heroin, and Sammy the Bull helped bring him down quite a bit. But that later on, even today, you see the Sicilian faction eventually moved up as they learned the language and did take over the Gotti family. I did find this article about a guy who talked about delivering the heroin. He made 15 trips back and forth delivering just pounds and pounds of heroin from Knickerbocker Avenue to 18th Street, which was the Gambino territory. So there was actual organized deliveries. A guy would take a pistol and go back and forth from Knickerbocker Avenue to 18th Street, where the Gambinos were, and they would just like making regular deliveries, just throw it, just load up the van, deliver the heroin, and head on back. So it was very organized, very industrial the way it was set up.
Interesting. Now, how this came to light for the FBI is interesting. You've heard of the FBI agent Joe Pistone, right, Cam?
Yes, sir. Donnie Brasco.
Donnie Brasco. He was undercover and as a jewel thief. Everybody's probably seen that movie. And Lefty Ruggiero takes him under his wing, and one point in time, as part of his schooling, Ruggiero points out a couple of men that he identifies as Salvatore Catalano and Cesare Bonaventre, and says they are the new Sicilian mafia members, and we call them Zips. He was just schooling the guy like your mentor at work would do when you're brand new at work. He said they worked directly for the upper echelon of the Bonanno family and directly for Carmine Galante. And of course, we know that they were, Bonaventre was one of the guards, one of the bodyguards for Galante, and they were both involved in getting and murdering him. But he also said, and it took a while for this to get to the right people in the FBI because, he was so deep undercover. Mm-hmm. He wasn't like meeting with a control agent all the time. He was making notes and writing stuff down, but it might have been 2 or 3 weeks or even a month before he got this to him. Yeah. And they were kind of starting to work on these Sicilians at the time. But Ruggiero said that these two guys were in control of all drug trafficking done kind of undercover by the Bonanno family because there was still a ban on drug activity, which means that, no, we can't do it, but these guys are doing it.
Leave it up to them.
So in 1977 is when they really started seeing this and when they started getting onto it. Carmine Galante is killed in 79. After his death, Sal Catalano was the kind of the boss for a little bit and then went right back to being the formal captain, as we said before, but kind of getting back into more of a kind of got out of the chronological order.
Just so much going on at this time.
Really,
it's easy to do.
And before they really knew about Pistone's intelligence, that he had gathered a Sicilian-born agent named Carmine Russo and another we call him Peckerwoods here, and another American, when back in the 40s and 50s and 30s, why the Italians called all of us Americans. And so this is a Peckerwood agent named Charles Rooney had been assigned to investigate an anonymous letter. And it's funny how these investigations all come together. You have all these, again, as I said, all these disparate parts that eventually somebody puts this together in a picture. Now, the writer of that letter said that there was an Italian restaurant on Knickerbocker Avenue just down the street from Joe and Mary's, and he had been threatened by a loan shark recently for failure to repay a debt. And the letter writer said it was Cesare Bonaventre and another guy, a Sicilian named Filippo Ragusa, and they had offered the debtor a way to repay his creditor. And all that debtor has to do was go to Italy and bring back a package. And the guy refused, and they killed him shortly after for his efforts. And whoever this letter writer was probably a relative or a really close contact. I'd say a relative. They never did come forth and tell him any more. But the supervisor over the one squad, well, I don't know if they call it the one squad there, the organized crime squad, assigned Rooney and Carmine Russo to focus on the Salvatore Catalano and Cesare Bonaventre, because they knew by then that these two guys were together and they were Sicilian. They didn't know it at the time, but this case would become their career case, and especially Carmine Russo, who was from Sicily and a native Sicilian speaker. And we talked a lot about him with the FBI agent Leon Flossie. So you know a little bit about him by now, folks. Of course, what do you do then? You start laying surveillances down on them. First thing you can do is you do that. You go out and see where they are, where they go, what kind of places they frequent. Who do they meet with regularly? Is there some kind of pay phones that they like to use a lot, or some kind of secret phones they like to use? What kind of cars they have? Where did they eat and drink, and who they socialize with when they went out? And this all takes weeks to get all this down until you get a pattern down. At one point in time, they saw him in a car registered to a particular company called the 4205 Supermarket, and it was owned by another Sicilian named Pasquale Conte, who was a Gambino associate. So once more, they keep putting these little disparate parts together. They identified another Sicilian they met with, and his name was Pino Ganci, who was they learned was a partner of Catalano in his pizza business. They learned that Ganci had been seen meeting with a man that Giuseppe Bono, who was a notorious Sicilian mafia boss over here from Sicily and well known in transnational circles to be involved in the international heroin trade. So you kind of see, Cam, you see how they start putting this together slowly but surely.
This one driving that one's car, and this company owned by this. Yeah, it's taking all these little parts and following this one, and it's easy to hear the summary or see it written in a paragraph or whatever. But you're talking this is 6 months of how many guys who are doing this research and putting it all together and tracing it down, and how many long nights and hours of hunting and sitting in the car and watching with binoculars and not sleeping, and coffee and candy bars, and how many other.
Yeah, watching and waiting and being bored and watching and waiting and being bored. They even saw this Bono guy carrying briefcases in and out of hotels that he wasn't staying at. So you start getting your it was Bonaventre. I said Bono, I meant Bonaventre. Guy carrying suitcases in and out of hotels that he wasn't staying at, and then it starts getting your suspicions get up. What the hell's he doing? But they didn't know
stealing towels.
Yeah, really, they didn't know this was the start of the pizza connection case. As I said, their career case. It wouldn't be till years later they learned that back in these days, Bonaventre and Sal Catalano and Pino Ganci, who was from Sicily, and the French connection pipeline had dried up, and they were using this Giuseppe Bono as a new source of supply. This informant was asked. The informant asked the agents, "Have you ever heard of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline?" And when the agent said, "Yeah," he said, "Well, we got the same thing coming in the United States, only it was heroin." So that's they're on to it, man. As they start identifying these different narcotics connections, putting a book on them, as they say. And during this time, Carmine Russo, the agent, and this guy was dogging, man. He really got into it more than the other, from what I read. But he ends up actually getting transferred. Agent Flossie brings him over as his assistant over in Italy to be his Sicilian. Kind of his he brings him over to Leon
Sicilian
Flossie
partner.
Leon Flossie brings Carmine Russo over eventually to be in charge of all mafia activities for the FBI that are happening down in Sicily. That was wow. His. Like, he had the Sicilian desk for the legal attache's office.
Wow.
Carmine, in his study of this, I mean, I really admire this guy. He got the book that Joe Bonanno had written "Honor Thy Father." And actually, that
Right.
what was it? Gay Talese wrote
Yeah.
"Honor Thy
Yes, Liz
Father."
wrote, yeah.
He starts finding out like
Man
Bonanno's
of honor.
father-in-law was a Bonaventre. So see,
Yeah.
one more clue.
Man of honor, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, men of honor. One more clue to put this together, and he knows. He sees the Bonannos and Carmine Galante, and now this Bonaventre, and they're all from Castellani del Golfo, which, by the way, means fortress of the sea. I had to look that up. What does that mean? I'd like to go to Sicily sometime and see all that. They say it's beautiful over there along the coastline.
After all the damage you've done, I don't know if they'd be too well.
Yes. The only thing I can think of is the needle and the damage done. I can't think of his name now, but anyhow, moving along. This investigation will turn up many, many more connections back to Castellani del Golfo and that immediate vicinity. Agents continue watching, recording license numbers. God, I've done that. Taking pictures, watching Catalano, and they noticed that he used a nearby payphone. And one time, after he made 2 quick phone calls at the payphone, he left and he met Paul Castellano. So that really raised
That's
up.
Definitely that's that puts your radar.
Yeah,
that's going to send up some flags.
Boss of the Zips, and I mean the boss of the Catalano is Castellano is the boss of the Gambino family at this point in time. You know, I know later that he was making money on the side off of drugs, and that's one reason that Gotti kind of had a little extra license to kill him, because everybody kind of knew that.
Yeah, because he was taking drug money when he had a prohibition on anybody else making it, and by that time it was a bit more free. By the time the 80s rolled around.
During this surveillance, they follow Catalano, and he meets with another Sicilian pizza place owner named Frank Castronovo. Record that and put it in the file. During this time, I mean, this thing just got crazy during these early years. There was a white-collar crime agent in New Rochelle, in the resident agency up there, and he got a call from one of his contacts in the financial industry. And this guy has information about a Sicilian that wanted to move $60 million to Switzerland. So
$60 million? Yeah. Jesus.
Here we got another Sicilian in the New York area wanting to move that kind of money.
That's a lot of damn pizza.
Yeah, that was an agent, Robert Paquette. And they start checking on Frank Cosa Nostro. You say that. You take a you go through this right here. Okay, go ahead.
Frank Cosa had an apartment to talk this transfer in the financial district. He called New York City, and they sent out a surveillance crew. They watched the man carry a heavy black bag. I mean, $200,000 in cash in this black bag. Surveillance crew watched him walk in and out of the building carrying boxes inside. So they're watching them exchange boxes of cash full of how many millions of dollars was it? $60 million. They're just carrying it out of a bag, transferring it to Switzerland, and the agents are watching them walk in and out of this building with black bags and cardboard boxes to deliver to a building in the financial district.
And then
that's how they're transferring money to Switzerland.
Right.
Big cardboard boxes.
They get a tag. They follow him away, and they get a tag number and address, and where he meets a couple other men, and they're both Sicilian. So they're getting into it, and that was back before the cocaine days, when the FBI and the IRS and everybody really got onto that money laundering thing. They weren't on to money laundering back then. Heck, during the straw man trials and all that. I've been asked, well, what'd they do with all that money? We don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody looked at the financial end of that. That was just not done that much back then. That only really started until all the South Americans started bringing all that cocaine up. They ran into so much
cash, yeah.
Yeah, because they found out about it down in Florida, and they really got onto it. And after that, they passed all kinds of laws on money laundering and came up with that. Any cash transaction over $10,000 had to be reported.
Yeah. When
Yep.
was that? Because your guys, all the guys who were involved in the skim basically owned so many businesses that were cash based. I know that Iappa and all those guys and Lombardo had so much real estate in a lot of his families, and Iappa and Cerrone, those guys. And I know the Savellas owned a lot of businesses all around Kansas City. I mean, they pretty much had ways of skimming away a chip at a time, right?
Yeah, you just have to, and again, that was before the CTR. So a guy like Nick Savella, he'd have a stockbroker he could take, $20,000 to and buy stock, and or
Right.
maybe go buy another corner building. Like he owned a whole corner up there, Vivian and Antioch, with about, I don't know, must have been 8 different businesses in one building, and then another business in off, across the parking lot, and it was a whole big corner of prime real estate. He owned that whole thing. Mainly he just rented them out to other people. So then, you got that free and clear from the cash money that you brought out. And then, then you got this steady stream of legitimate money coming in all the time from the rents.
Yeah.
So this Agent Paquette, he starts doing this surveillance, and he recording tag numbers and stuff. And he puts Cosa Nostra with Salvatore Catalano. So here we go. Well, one more link. Other people are putting together other disparate pieces of. Other people are putting together little bits of disparate information. There was a anonymous letter about how a man could pay off a debt by running a package from Sicily. There was another one of those. So I mean, it was all Sicily. It was all Sicilians. And it was all about drugs, and it was all about transporting narcotics. But it was just, you know it. I know how this goes. You know it, but you don't know it.
Right.
You just have to keep working and working and working. These guys rented an apartment under a subterfuge down there by Catalano's bakery and put a camera on the payphone. And there's some of these videos out there on YouTube. I think if you did Catalano payphone on YouTube, you probably could find these videos. I've seen the little clips.
Yeah. Real grainy videos of him walking.
Right.
Yeah.
In black and white, kind of middle-aged guys, mainly wearing suits and stuff. They were not tracksuit kind of guys.
No, not back then.
Of course, I got a pen register on there, and pen registers lighting up with all kinds of calls. Particularly, what was interesting, one day, May the 5th, 1981, you remember that?
Yeah, that was the 3 capos. I bet that thing blew up.
That's what it did. Who were those guys? I can't remember their names.
It was Dominic Trinchera, Sonny Red Indelicato, and Philip Lucky Giacone. When that was part of that whole power struggle when Joe Massino and Sonny Black Napolitano took over and wiped out the last power struggle, basically giving Rastelli full control, which basically gave Massino control because he was running things while Rastelli was behind bars.
Yeah, they were kind of cleaning house, cleaning up.
That's right.
Unfinished business is what they were doing, because those guys wanted to take it over, so they just struck first. Is that the one where Vito Rizzuto came down from Montreal and helped with that? It was, wasn't it?
Yes. You got some Sicilians coming in there too.
But the FBI, they see this phone light up right after these guys get killed. That says, you know what that tells you, doesn't it? They're more important than what you might think. Those dudes are, otherwise you wouldn't call them. They wouldn't care that much. They're down in the totem pole, but when you're on high up on the totem pole, why, just like at work, you got to notify the important people about something important. That's right. The people that aren't so important, you don't notify them. They figure it out through the grapevine eventually. This was, I think you just said Rusty Rastelli and Joe Massino were running the Bonanno family. At this point,
It's just incredible the amount of activity that's going on. You've got the Sicilians with the heroin shipment, and then you've got this political stuff going on over here with the three capos going on. This is all in one family, and then they're still partnering up with Montreal, getting these. I mean, there's so many moving parts, and this is basically one family. And there's four others in New York, and then there's Chicago and Kansas City, were just a few years earlier involved with the skim. I mean, this is what you all, Gary, were dealing with in the 70s as far as chasing these guys around. I mean, they were really keeping y'all busy back then.
Oh yeah, we had four families involved in the one thing, plus what was going on in Las Vegas. So
yeah.
You have to admire that Bill Owsley, who had to keep track of all this, and Leon Flossie was an integral part of that. I always kind of give Owsley more credit because we remained friends, and he was the case agent on it. But anyhow, that was there was just a lot going on. Now at this point in time, we had actually Frank Story was a new special agent in charge in New York. He started looking at this investigation. He was in Kansas City, I believe, just before this. No, just after this. He worked on this for a while, and then he came to Kansas City. I'd met him. He's a real dynamic guy, and he looked at Russo and the other guy's work. He said and this agent Paquette with the money laundering, and Paquette was still monitoring money transfers. And I read that Agent Story was tough as nails, no nonsense agent, and he was. I remember that he was like a legend when he was in Kansas City, and he was well known to be a hard ass. He called all these agents together and said, "Okay, you guys all got to get together on this." He saw the importance of it and said, "Somebody's got to work on Title IIIs," because what he said was, and I could hear him saying this, you can watch these guys forever and never make a case. And I remember that feeling, you can watch somebody forever and never really make a case on them. You got to get on that.
It's got to be frustrating. Something like that's got to be frustrating.
He came down on them hard, according to that last of the Sicilians book I read. He even accused them of not having enough skill to write up a good Title III affidavit, which it does take a lot of work to write up a Title III affidavit, and maybe none of them had ever done it. They were kind of new. They really only started it in, say, 1970. So there's a lot of agents that,
right.
Today there's a lot of agents that never written one up. And at that point in time, there's a lot of agents that hadn't, for even more agents that hadn't their pen registers were put. Go ahead.
I was just saying, yeah, probably even more back then, as new as it was.
Yeah, really. Here's kind of an interesting thing about the money laundering during this time. This agent Paquette had determined that a guy named Del Torre, they learned about him through some of their surveillances, was trying to send millions in small bills through an E.F. Hutton office to Switzerland. I guess he just kept hitting these different places trying to get somebody to help him out with that. And these guys, these stockbrokers, there are a lot of hustlers that are stockbrokers, and if they think there's enough money in their pocket, they may take a risk.
Yeah, especially in New York back then. My father was working the market in New York back around this time in the 70s. He said it was wide open.
Yeah, but these guys got nervous and tipped off the FBI that this guy was trying to do that, and they kind of started in on it, but one of the people at E.F. Hutton also tipped off this Del Torre dude, and he all of a sudden closed his accounts and just disappeared. Now they went back and jumped on E.F. Hutton, and turned out it was like the whole company said, we're worried for the safety of our employees, so we just wanted to get rid of the guy.
So that's why they tipped him off, because they just wanted him gone.
Yeah, and this Paquette, he was a bulldog though, man. He didn't let that go. We started trying to locate the guy. He subpoenaed the guy's American Express account after he found out he had an American Express credit card, and he identified a bunch of hotels that he stayed at, and he got phone records off those hotels, and that started connecting him to different pizza shop owners in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and one of them was Salvatore Catalano in Queens. So here's another guy in the money laundering chain, all going back to Catalano and going back to pizza shop places. So slowly but surely it's coming together.
The way, as creative as y'all had to be on these investigations, I mean, like you said, you've got to check this phone record, or you've got to look which company owns this car they're using. It's just an incredible degree of creativity you've got to assemble. I mean, you're really cracking your brain. It's just. I mean, there's something artistic about it. I think the way you all would get into these investigations. I mean, that's the way I see it. It's almost artistic.
Yeah, it's not like a practice. It's more like an art. There's a certain amount of intuitive. A good artist will have inspiration and put something together and do it. Well, a good policeman working these kinds of big cases is like an artist in that way. He'll look at all these disparate parts and he'll start seeing how they fit together and painting a picture of what they are and what's going on. Because you just, you kind of know, but so you got to paint this picture that you can't really prove in a court. And maybe you can't even convince your boss sometimes what you think's going on is going on. Or you can't convince your fellow agents or fellow cops what you think's going on is going on. And a lot of doubters out there, because they don't want to work mainly, but be a lot of doubters out there that'll try to bring you down when you come up with something that some kind of a conspiracy.
It just, whenever I talk to you, and you talk about things you hunted down, or leads that y'all followed, or the different agents. I mean, just the creativity involved in that process is what really gets me. Is tracking down the owner of the company, of the car that they were driving, or his FBI records, and then going to the different hotels from months ago and his phone records. I mean, you might say it sounds obvious now that we're saying it, but in the heat of the moment, months after a guy stayed at a hotel, to go back and look at his phone records, I mean, based on his American Express receipts, which you were able to subpoena, there's a lot of steps to that a lot of people probably wouldn't think of.
Really. Now, it's during this time, we're up to about the 1980s now, and go back to see what our friend Gaetano Badalamenti, and he's down in South America at this point in time. He's kind of on the lam. They had this
mafia war,
and Salvatore Reina won, and Badalamente's down in South America, and he's orchestrating all this dope coming back and forth, and Tommaso Buscetta is helping with that. He tries to get Buscetta to go after these other Sicilian bosses from Corleone. Those are the ones, if you remember, when we talked about Buscetta, those are the ones that were trying to get Badalamenti and keep all his family down, pushed down and out of the business. Buscetta refused. Badalamenti sent some others and killed several men. And it was during this time that Salvatore Reina probably was responsible for killing some of Buscetta's relatives, and including his two sons. They went missing. They were, and I think I mentioned this before, they were the victims of a Lupara Blanca, or white shotgun, which meant their bodies were never found, but he found out they tortured them, which this is, if you remember, this is what really kind of sent him over the edge. And he ended up coming in, turned himself in, and he Giuseppe Falcone interviewed him and learned a lot of information. He ended up testifying at the huge big trial that we've talked about before, and Leon Flossie talked about it. I asked him if he made it down to see that trial, but he couldn't make it down to see it.
It's kind of a guy like Badalamenti, who's at the top, at the height of his power. It just shows how the higher you get, the more responsibility you have. He's watching his drug operations in America, and he's also got to he's got to. We think about these mob guys as nothing but leisure, but he's watching his drug. He's overseeing drug operations in America. He's related to a lot of the guys who own these shops. He's monitoring. There's a drug war going on in Sicily, and he's still got relatives there, and he's part of the war, even though he himself is fleeing, and he has to keep himself alive, but he also he's on the run from the police while in South America, so he has to sort of keep a low profile. It's just that he has a lot of irons in the fire, and I'm sure there's time for leisure in there, but it's kind of like a CEO of a company. You've got a lot of things going on.
Well, that'd wear anybody out, wouldn't it, all that?
It just puts things in perspective when you look at how many different irons they have in the fire, as opposed to just thinking they're just riding around having fun all day,
Really?
Just collecting checks.
Yeah, collecting checks. No collecting checks in the mafia.
Collecting cash, yeah, picking up envelopes all day. I mean, it's a little bit more to it.
Really. So during this time, Carmine Russo is sent over to Sicily to try to develop some connections with the Italian police over there. They're standoffish at first, and as we find out that eventually Lee Flossie's over there as the legat or the legal attaché, and he starts developing connections with the local police and with Judge Falcone. The only thing he does learn that this Giuseppe Bono that they have been under investigation is involved in heroin smuggling. So the FBI, and go back to that one with Lee Flossie, they stayed after him, and they ended up forming a relationship. They invited a bunch of them over, including Falcone, over to the United States, and relations improved. And pretty soon they're working together, really formed a task force which they shared a lot of information. And our guy, Flossie, was right in the middle of that, facilitating all that. Going back to the United States, Russo and Rooney are still watching. There's a pizza restaurant called the Al Dente Pizza Restaurant, and they see this Giuseppe Ganci, who was one using a payphone with Salvatore Catalano, and they had a wire up on those. And what they're hearing now after the pen registers, they're hearing coded conversations like onion sprouting. They're about ready to ship, and somebody's ordering 5 shirts. And, that's the kind of stuff that is all typical drug code and anybody in the drug business. And you can put that in maybe another transcript or you can put that in another affidavit for another wiretap if you spin off to another phone and say, this is, my opinion, my expert opinion, that is drug talk. They're talking about some kind of narcotics transactions.
You don't have to have the specific, you don't have somebody change the specific code. You can just say this is code.
Yeah. They went into high gear, and they must have really transferred a lot of agents in. Matter of fact, they did transfer a lot of agents in. It was around the clock wiretap. Wow. And physical surveillance. Anytime you had somebody up on the wire, you had physical surveillance. This went on for the next 18 months. They said
they were speaking in Sicilian.
Right, and speaking in Sicilian. That's another thing that Lee Flossie talked about. He would bring some Italian, Sicilian speaking officers over to help sit on wiretaps during this investigation. And Carmine Russo was a native speaker, but if you're an Italian speaker, you can't understand Sicilian. You could probably pick up some things, but not good enough for a wiretap. The book said that there was over 100,000 conversations recorded during this time. Can you imagine? They had those tapes. There'd be stacks and stacks and stacks of those tapes and transcripts.
Now we've got data, and you just put it on a thumb drive. But then y'all were dealing with big reels of tape.
I've seen it. Yes,
Jesus.
I have seen it, man. It's unbelievable.
It's got to be reviewed and put before a court.
Yeah. Russo will do the lion's share of this work. He probably hardly ever slept, man, especially since he was a native speaker, because somebody will get something. Does this sound like something? You listen to it. You can tell us.
Wake his ass up right away.
Really, man. This is when Baldo Amato shows up quite a little bit. Who was one of the other Galente bodyguards and Catalano's partner during that time, and they connect him to another pizza shop. So now they got more pizza shops and more pizza shops. They got this Giuseppe Ganci. In and out, and they know he's a Sicilian heroin smuggler. They started following him. They even found his girlfriend, his Camare, a gal named Carol. And it's kind of an interesting side story. One time, Ganci and his wife, and Sal Catalano and his wife, went on a trip to Florida. Well, Ganci, now believe this or not, he brought Carol, his girlfriend, down to Florida and put her in another hotel room. I guess he couldn't be without her for a period of time. He'd slip away and go see her.
She had that good stuff.
Well, somehow, I don't know. I don't quite understand this, but somehow her suitcase got mixed up with Catalano's wife's suitcase, and she opened it, and she knew it wasn't hers, and she knew it was his girlfriend. Most of those mob wives, they know the husband has the Camare on the side. They know that, and they don't like to have it slapped in their face for sure. They said she didn't really create any problems about it, but she let him know that she knew what was going on. And in kind of another side story, when they eventually served search warrants, the Bureau will serve a search warrant on her place, on Carol's place, and she kept a diary. And each time that they put together when he went to her house, her apartment, on that date, she would make one entry on that date, sex.
I knew a guy who's in the hospital for a condition, and his wife goes to visit him, and while she's in there, his girlfriend shows up to see him the same day. He walked out of the hospital to meet a divorce attorney.
Oh, well. By 1983, they're putting it together. They got to find dope. You got to get dope on the table somewhere. Nobody's seen any dope yet.
Yeah.
They haven't figured out a way to like serve a search warrant and snag any that they can link to these people. There's a call that comes in from a guy named Zito, Benny Zito. And this Gansey and Zito had some coded drug talk, and they agreed to meet and finalize some kind of a deal.
Sounds like a drug guy, doesn't he?
Yeah, really. And shortly after, a day or two after, there was a late model of Volkswagen appeared with Pennsylvania plates and connected up with Gansey. And at the same time down in Philadelphia, there's a DEA agent named Hobson who has an informant that's connected to a local pizza shop, and he's selling heroin. And there's another DEA agent working on another Sicilian at another pizza place, and he's making inroads on being accepted, and they're selling heroin out of this other pizza place down in Philadelphia, and they're all Sicilian. Well, this DEA agent...
There's just too many lining up, Right. But at
this
time, I wonder if the DEA would have been talking to the FBI that much,
Not yet, not right, not then, and they usually didn't. Back then especially, they didn't have a whole lot to do with each other. They would work together if something came together. But
something big,
there was not any like regular interaction. Hey, we got this going, and FBI said, hey, we got this going, and see if, like they do today in all these different joint
I guess 9/11 is what really pulled all that together.
We had a good relationship with them, but between the federal agencies, the intelligence unit in Kansas City was like the hub between all the federal agencies. They didn't really talk to each other very much, but they talked to us. And so if we would hear, especially our sergeant, Larry Wisher, if he would hear something from one agent who would come in and drop something on him or ask us to check on something, and then the FBI, they might come in and he might ask them, hey, you ever heard of this guy? Or maybe they'd come in and ask about something that was close, and he'd start to put them together. That happened more than once. But down in Philadelphia, this agent Hobson, and he gets a female agent to go along with him, which was pretty common. They get introduced into this Benny Zito, who has been seen with Gansey a lot. They convince Zito to sell him a half a kilo for $120,000, half a kilo of heroin. And during that time, while they're with him, this Zito jumps on a phone, has some coded drug talk to somebody in New York. Well, the FBI is up here listening to Gansey on the other end on that conversation. On
a DEA drug buy.
Yeah. Another Philly DEA said that there was a Sicilian he knew was complaining that he was dealing with Sal Catalano and Baldo Amato, and the last shipment, the purity was not near what it should be. So here now they're putting them together with real dope down in Philadelphia, and they're getting ready to buy some.
They called them Siggies. That's what Leonardo and Philip Leonardo and Scarpo. They in his book he calls Italians Siggies.
No, really? Huh? Interesting. Yeah. Another DEA agent down there and has another informant that learns about Amato Catalano, and he's picking up rumors that these are the men that set up the hit on Carmine Galante, and the new boss, Joe Massino, rewarded them with all the heroin business in the United States. So again, you just get all these different little tidbits are coming in and coming in. Mm-hmm. The New York FBI and the Philly DEA didn't know what each other knew. But luckily, the Philly DEA started checking the New York names through the FBI intelligence files, and they get directed to call Russo and Rooney, Carmine Russo and Agent Rooney, and let them know, and like, uh-oh. So they tell them what the deal is. They go ahead and front the money, and they make a half a kilo buy and then a kilo buy from this Benny Zito. So now they've got dope. They've got actual dope. The New York FBI watched Zito come to Gansey's home and pick something up and then take it back. Same thing on the second buy. They watched him do the same thing. It was a whole kilo. And what was interesting, they wrapped the money, the $240,000 that they gave to Zito to buy the kilo, they put it in a gift wrap box so it would be real evident. So they see Zito going to Gansey's house with this same gift wrap box. Now that was slick. That was smart, man.
Yeah. Then you know.
That if you want to see that, folks, in that The Last of the Sicilians book by Ralph Blumenthal's got that picture, that gift wrap
picture
box.
Of the box.
And then the plain brown box on when he's coming out, and that's going to be the heroin. And the heroin they buy is 83% pure, which means,
better than that shit they're getting in Philly.
Oh man, that's just coming right from Afghanistan, practically. Man, that's some pretty pure heroin stuff. You can really step on that a bunch. You can make a lot of money off of that. But they can't keep buying that, and they don't want to take. The FBI doesn't want them to take it down yet, so they just have to sit on it. They got the heroin, they got the cases made. Now they just have to back off because they can't keep going in with $240,000 and buying kilos of heroin. I worked with a DEA agent once, and we were making a little guy was claiming to be a mob guy, and we never heard of him before. It turned out he was in witness protection from another city, but he was making little marijuana buys from him, and we wanted DEA needed to have a big enough buys to really do something with him. They couldn't do it with 3 or 4 little buys. And I remember this DEA agent said, "Well, we'll make a marijuana dealer out of him." That means they just keep buying and buying and buying until they got enough weight that their boss will let them open a case and go after him.
Oh shit, that's dirty pool.
Man, there's a lot of weird things happen during this time. Like they put a microphone in Gansey's car, and I've seen shit like this happen. Gets wired in the system and draws down on the battery even when the mic's off, and that keeps running the battery down. And the battery keeps running down, so they take it in to get it worked on, and then they have to go. What they did, we had a deal. I'll tell you about it. We had a deal just like this in Kansas City. Gansey goes to his Gomare's Carol's house for sex, which is would be one of those dates that she says sex.
It's in her calendar, sex.
Yeah, they just steal the car and take it to the garage to take out the listening device, but he comes out early. So he calls the police to report a stolen car. Huh? So they just have to dump it.
They gave him more credit than he deserved.
Yeah, really. So, by this point in time, they're going to start taking everybody down. I got another piece of paper around here somewhere that I'm missing. So now we're up to about 1984. They're putting all this together. We're up to about 1984. They're putting all this together, as you can tell, Cam. Tons of information. They got dope on the table. They've got all the different people identified. They've got all these wiretaps, but they want this Gaetano Badalamenti, who is kind of the overall boss, and they can't find him. He's one of these transnational criminals that no telling where he's going to be. Those are really difficult.
Always on the move.
People to find. He's not coming to the United States at all. He's already got a warrant, I believe, in the United States. They've got these telephone intercepts on some of these different pizza places, and there's one, Pietro Pete Alfano in Oregon, Illinois. Like I said, there was Rockford, Oregon, and Paris, Illinois. There was all 3 of them were run by Sicilians, and they were running this dope.
Way west of Chicago. It's a good click west, and then Paris is a good deal south. So they're avoiding the city by a decent clip.
Yeah, we checked on that with
Yeah.
Frank Calabrese Jr. and Red Womet and Lee Flossie kind of said the same thing, that, the outfit, they have a real strong rules against dealing drugs, and they just didn't want anything to do with it. And probably they didn't even know what was going on because they stayed far enough out of town that they didn't even know what was going on. I think you mentioned that Frank Ballesteri and that family up in Milwaukee may have been connected into them in some way, and shipping drugs down to primarily the black community in south side of Chicago.
Yeah. And they would have been getting a lot of drugs from the either through Canada or at least through the Bonannos, because they were so tight. Milwaukee was so tight with the Bonannos through the cheese company.
Yeah, they may not have even been connected to these Sicilians. They may have had another source
Right.
out of Montreal, like you said.
Right.
But they want to take it down, but they want Badalamenti. And I remember these times when you want to get that one guy, and because he'll just go to ground and you'll never ever find him if he realizes that the heat's really on. So they've got these wiretaps up. They've been shipping this. Matter of fact, I don't think I mentioned this, and Lee Flossie told me, and I've had a couple others tell me that they've been shipping this heroin hidden in these pizza supplies, whether it be the dough or the cans of tomato sauce. And they also were sending over pallets of Italian marble, and those hollowing out the middle and putting the heroin down in the pallets of Italian marble and sending that out. But mainly it was the pizza places, and they were the places that got the money back in. The dealers would come and the kind of the intermediate level dealers would come and get the large amounts, and they'd go out to their sub dealers and their street dealers and keep them supplied out of these pizza places. So they're on this wiretap with Badalamentti's nephew, Pietro Pete Alfano, and get a telephone call from Brazil. And they're listening to it, and they've got probably got one of their Sicilian cops that were sent over by Flossie to monitor this and to interpret it real quick. And they realize that this is probably Gaetano Badalamenti talking to him, and he's ordering him to meet him in Madrid, Spain, in just a few days later. So they immediately get hold of the Italian police and the Spanish police, and they catch Badalamenti and his son Vito Badalamenti with Pietro Alfano and bring them back to the United States. So that's when they served search warrants on everybody and started, taking grand jury and witnesses that they've turned. And by this point in time, Tommaso Bruschetta has turned, and he's a storyteller on the deal. It becomes this massive trial. It takes over a year. Rudy Giuliani was the U.S. attorney that was in charge of that. He wasn't on the day-to-day. I think he was the U.S. attorney for the Southern District. Other U.S. attorneys were actually in the day-to-day business. But it was a hell of a trial, man.
I found a guy, Luigi Ronisvalle, and I mentioned a little bit earlier, and I told you I literally just found him. He was just one of the regular Zips, the day-to-day, who delivered heroin around, but he sort of describes the day-to-day life. And before the trial, he was starting to I don't know that he gave them anything of substance because he wasn't at a high enough level that he could talk about Badalamenti, or I think he knew Catalano, but he would talk about the day-to-day life. He'd say little things like, we cut the pellets out of the shotguns and we replaced them with nail heads, and he talked about contract killings and things like that. So they had a street level understanding of what the Zips were doing on the streets. He had I don't even think he had a pizza shop. I think he worked for a guy. But so that's just another informant at a much lower level. And then they had Bruschetta at a higher level who knew all the names. So they really had built a hell of a case. And then they finally had this buy. So the extent to which they had built this case was incredible. And then they're reaching out. They have the Italians involved, and then they use the Spanish to arrest this guy. It's such a huge endeavor that took place, multi-states and multi-countries. It's just such a massive thing these guys were working on.
Really, you have to wonder, was there panic in Needle Park when all this went down? Did it drive up at all? I swear to God, Cam, I worked cocaine during the day, and it didn't seem to ever make any difference. I don't care how big a shipment was intercepted, there was still more than enough, and it just got cheaper all the time because it was just flooding in.
This would have been 84, 85. And that's about the time that, the Gulf cartel would have been bringing heroin up with Garcia Abrego. They were bringing heroin up. So they just filled in the vacuum. So that was around 80, 84, 85, 86. So they just, you're not getting it from up north. They just backfill from down south.
Yeah, because they were already getting cocaine. The Sicilians were already getting cocaine and from down south. They had set up a pipeline of cocaine from Badalamente's connections that he's made down there in Bruschetta too, I believe down in Venezuela. So that's it's just never in its whack-a-mole, man. That narcotics business, there is no end to it. I don't know. I don't need to go down that path on whether the laws do any good or should just put all that money into treatment and
legalization.
Legalization, then trying to stop the demand rather than the supply, because stopping the supply has never ever worked.
It didn't work with alcohol. It really just created organized crime.
Yeah, exactly, and it's created the Mexican cartels today. Yeah. That huge amount of money. I mean, the whole country of Mexico is corrupt. I'd hate to have been caught down there during this coronavirus thing really causes any kind of civil disorder down there, because there is no real civil authority that's not totally corrupted by the cartels, and who knows what would happen. I got him on this YouTube channel, this guy I know that's traveling around the world, or traveling around the United States actually on his motorcycle and camping out, and he's kind of a fun guy, and he got caught just a few days ago down there in Mexico coming back from Cabo San Lucas, and he was desperately trying to get to the border before he was afraid they're going to close the border down. He was going to be stuck in Mexico.
Shit, I reckon.
On a motorcycle, and he didn't really he's not a guy that has a whole bunch of cash money either, so.
No, shit.
He's got to scuffle it, and he'd have friends. He has a lot of followers, so if something happened to him, people would Venmo him or do something like that to get him some money. But anyhow,
I'd rather not run into that. I'd rather not run into that issue. Just get.
So this is the end of the Pizza Connection case, and it was like, for it was kind of like the skim trials, and it took down a bunch of people and stopped that whole thing. Now it's come back up since, and those Sicilians are still there, and they're running the Gambino family for sure. I'm not sure where they are with the Bonanno family or what the modern iteration of that is. I can't remember, but they're definitely running the Gambino family.
Well, it's like the skim trial in that, whenever this goes down, there were two shootings after. Whenever there's going to be people who get killed. There was a guy, Gaetano Mazzara, who was a made guy. He disappeared. He found with 2 sharp stab wounds to his head. He was found with his watch, $700, and his wallet with his ID. When they found him, he disappeared for 4 days. So if he's found with all that, they wanted him found.
Yeah.
His lawyer said his absence was most involuntary indeed. And
he must have been afraid he was going to testify or turn.
Yeah. So he was found in Brooklyn. They threw him out of a car on a roadside. And Pietro Alfano, who was the nephew of Badalamenti, he was shot in Brooklyn. I guess he had been there for a couple days. He was carrying groceries with his wife in the street, and a couple guys jumped out and shot him. There was a bystander, a guy named Ronald Price, who was also hit, a young guy, 30 years old. So he was just happened to be standing there. A nurse from a local doctor's office jumped out and administered first aid. Pietro Alfano lived, but his wife, a nearby bystander heard her say, "We shouldn't have come here." So it sounds like maybe they should not have come to New York. They were obviously from Illinois originally, but those are the two falling out, 2 shootings that occurred as a result of this trial.
You want to say those last couple of sentences again? Something fell down over there.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Pause it for a second. All right. Hold on. There's a lot of noise out here. Hold on a second. All right. Hey, Jim, pull him down in the room with you, please.
I'm digging him out.
All right, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
It's that damn dog running down the hole.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
I'm sorry.
That's
I
okay.
heard it, but I didn't. He hit the damn door chasing his ball.
It was pretty loud, so go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Pietro Alfano, he was shot in Brooklyn carrying groceries with his wife. A nurse from a local doctor's office helped resuscitate, but a local bystander was with him, a guy named Ronald Price, a young guy, 31 years old. And he lived, but his wife said to him, "We really shouldn't have come here," is what somebody heard her say. So it sounds like they shouldn't have come to New York. They were from Illinois. But just like with the skim trial, you definitely see people killed in the aftermath of the trial where they're going to testify. Alfano could have been that was they later found out Catalano had something to do with that, and that was a falling out between Badalamenti and Catalano. And then you've got Mazzara, and nobody knows why he got whacked out. He was 50 odd years old, and he was a made guy, so maybe he was going to testify. Maybe he pissed somebody off. I don't know, somebody's cousin's brother's uncle or something. But people definitely were killed in the aftermath of this trial before they got a chance to take the stand. They were out on $1.5 million bail. So, and that's a hell of a big bond in the early '80s.
Yeah, really. Well, Gaetano Badalamenti, he got 45 years in prison. He ends up dying in prison. And that friend of mine, Steve St. John, was in the joint with him. He was asked by a local guy, mob guy named Junior Bradley, that was kind of Junior Bradley's job, was to have contacts in the penitentiary system, all through the penitentiary, the federal penitentiary system. I was on a wiretap once, and actually it was a Freedom phone that he had. We had actually given him a Freedom phone when you could just listen to those with a Bearcat scanner, and
right.
Junior got a call, and Junior's you'll have to listen to my this undercover state trooper show and to hear all about Junior Bradley. It was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, folks. I don't want to go back and explain. He was just a mob fence and a good guy, but he got a call one day to go send word up to Leavenworth to take care of some kid that was coming up there. So my friend Steve was down in Springfield at the hospital, and Badalamenti was down there, and he got a call or message from Junior to, "Hey, this guy's down there. I want you to take care of him. We want to make sure he's looked out for and anything he needs." So Steve started buddying around with him and did whatever he wanted him to do and palled around with him. Here's a little clip that I recorded over the phone to Steve, because we can't do anything in person now. So I'll play that clip then and throw that in there. It's just a little short deal that I finally got him to say something. He wants to do it, and I want to do a whole podcast about that thing, but then all this other stuff. We both went out of town for February. So anyhow, I'll go back. Well, now that was my friend Steve St. John on being in the penitentiary with Gaetano Badalamenti, and he was a stone killer. People in Sicily were petrified of him if you were in the life, but Steve found him to be a pretty genial fella, which is the way these guys are. That's one thing I've always noticed about him. These guys, most of them, on a personal level, they've got good personalities and they're pretty genial guys. Now, don't get on the wrong side of them.
Yeah, right.
So this trial went on for a year, and Rudy Giuliani made his bones and went on to be the president's personal lawyer now, but we won't go down that path.
We all know where that ended up.
We don't need to go down that path. I don't really have anything else on it. It was a hell of an investigation, man. This Carmine Russo, I'd like to get him on. I'm going to have to make a run and see if I can't find him, just to find out about the rest of his career outside of this, and a little bit about this.
Yeah, need to reach out. That would be a hell of a damn interview.
It would. All right, you got anything else, Cam?
No, this was you did a lot of work on this, and it was a big story, and you've been working on it for a while. So I'm really glad you let me be part of it.
Right. Well, you've been a big help on a lot of other things too, and you're pretty good help on this, but I have to admit, I dove into this because I really found it fascinating. I found this thing fascinating. I see I record like we got a total of an hour and 42 minutes. I may have to cut this up into 2. But, my plan is I'm going to put all these up at one time so people can just stop and then start it back up again. They're all sitting at home wondering, wishing they had something to do anyhow.
That's right.
It's going to take me a long time to edit.
You could just put this as a special long coronavirus episode.
Yeah, that's what it's going to be. Well, along with 2 or 3 others, give everybody something to do.
That's right.
All right, folks, if you want to hit the podcast up on the Venmo app, it's Gangland Wire. Give us $1 or $2 to help out with the different costs we have associated to it. And then a lot of you have, and other donations, why we appreciate it. Now remember, if you're a veteran or you believe you have problems that might come from PTSD connected to your service time, or even if you just have PTSD, you can call. If you're a veteran, call your local vet center. Every big city has one, or your VA hospital. But there's a national hotline too, 1-800-273-8255. And press 1 if you're a veteran. Now, if you're a relative or you just want to know more about this or find some resources, there's a website the government has, the VA has, it's www.ptsd.va.gov. And this site contains a lot of really good resources for family of veterans and for veterans or anybody that has PTSD. A lot of people suffer from that. I have my movies. I don't really feel like going down that path. Everybody knows I've got my movies, so Cam, I appreciate.
Brothers Against Brothers is a hell of a thing. You never see somebody who's in the middle of a mob war tell the story of it. And Leaving Las Vegas, where you've got the actual mob clips in the text of the story. That's really something too. I was looking at that the other day on the Kindle. That's quite a compilation you've got there, Leaving Vegas.
It is different, isn't it? I've never seen anything quite like it before.
No, absolutely not.
It's kind of like my Kansas City Mob Tour app. There's not many of those mob tour apps.
No, nothing like that.
Throughout the United States either. I'm kind of surprised, but what do I know? I'm the king of digital in the mob world. That's what Larry Henry down in Fayetteville told me. I was the king of digital in mob world. So that's fine. I like doing that. Cam, I appreciate your help, and folks, good luck with the coronavirus. I think we're all going to pull through this okay. It's just kind of more scary and maybe a little more panic out there than needs to be, but it is something that we need to be concerned about. Good night, folks.
Absolutely.
Good night, Cam.
Good night, Gary.